Hello, hello, hello. This is Carrie from Kenny Brown Performance, and are at the Transform Your Driving Experience workshop, and we are happy to have you here. We're going to wait for a few more people to join in, and we're going to see who is here. It's like Bruce Hamilton. I see you there. Glad you joined us. Good to see you. So we also have, Joe Johnson, yay. Joe is from one of our Speed Therapy Academy, the first group. He is an alumni, so it's great to have you here, Joe. Jim Linden, I don't think that's Jennifer McGrath, but it's Mr. McGrath. That's what we'll call you, yay. Phil, looks like Thornton's class. Oh, I really figured that one out. Sorry about that, Thornton. And what we're doing right now is we're just waiting for everybody to come into the group. I want to give you just a little tip right now is that if you start getting a bad connection, if you will take your, stop your video, so we don't see your face. Sometimes when we get too many people in the group, it will bog down the server. So we want to make sure, hopefully we'll be able to see your face, but take your face off if you start having a bad connection. We had that happen once. We have 500 people joining us tonight. We are simulcasting live on Facebook and on Zoom. And the reason we're doing that is our Facebook has been having some difficulties in the last couple months, and we are experiencing that tonight. So we are going to be having Zoom, people from the Facebook group joining us on Zoom. So it may take a little bit longer before we get started, but we will get started. Kenny is in the room, so he is there with us. Let's see, can everybody see me? Can you wave? Yay. Okay, good. Let's see. Brad is here. Brad works with us. If you have any questions, you can ask him in the chat and he will help you out. Brad will be adding the workbook link in the chat in case you haven't gotten your workbook yet. Kenny, do you want to bring up that next screen and I will start going through some of the information? Kenny's going to be sharing his screen. He's going to be doing a PowerPoint tonight, and this is the beginning of his PowerPoint. So again, I'm going to just be making a few announcements while we're waiting for people to come in. Again, this is Transform Your Driving Experience Workshop with Kenny Brown. I am Carrie Southworth, and I work for the Kenny Brown team. Can we go to the next screen, please? And we have 500 people joining us tonight, so it should be pretty interesting. We're really excited about it, so we want to welcome you to the workshop. We are simulcasting live on both Zoom and on Kenny's Speed Therapy Society Facebook page. The reason we chose to do that is because Facebook has been having some difficulties lately, and we are experiencing them tonight. So we wanted to make sure we could get you on one of the platforms. So we are going to be streaming on Zoom and seeing later on if we can be hooking up to the Speed Therapy Society on Facebook. So anyway, for Zoom participants, when you come in, if you could please remain muted for the workshop. We are if you have questions at the end, Kenny will be answering your questions. So again, there will be a Q&A at the end. Add your questions to the chat, and there's usually tons of questions because Kenny goes through this pretty fast, and you're gonna amazed at what you learn. So at the very end, what we will do is I will read your name and ask your question, and then if you can unmute at that point and you can ask Kenny the question or anything else, just go back and forth. So again, we are going to keep muted until I say your name and read your question, and then you can communicate with Kenny. Again, the workshop should be adding to the link. I think he's letting people in. So in another minute or two, we will have the link to the workbook in case you did not get that. That's a great thing to follow along as Kenny's talking. Here's what it should look like right here. I don't know if you can see the little thing of me. And then.
There you go. Now you can show it.
Okay, there. Okay, then I need to go back. Here we go. So, and this is going to be a great resource for you.
No, it's not showing up.
Okay, well, why don't you share the screen again, Kenny, so I can continue talking on my little, looks like Tony, Walter Record is here, Bretton's iPhone, Darren. Wow, lots of people, lots and lots of people. Again, we have 500 people that signed up for this workshop, so it should be pretty pretty fun. Again, if you're just joining us, we are simulcasting live between Zoom and Kenny's Speed Therapy Society Facebook group. We are having a few technical difficulties on the Facebook group. So we're going to wait another minute or two before we can get those people switched over to the Zoom link. Again, for Zoom participants, if you can please be on mute during the workshop, and then when we're asking questions, we'll ask you on mute to ask your questions to Kenny. If you have any questions or need any assistance, we have a number of Team Kenny Brown Workshop ambassadors with us: Bridget, Brad, Brendan, Kelsey, and Rich. So if you have any questions at all, just shoot them in the chat, or if you have their direct contact information, just shoot them a text or an email. You should have had Brandon or Kelsey or Bridget reach out to you, and they're trying to instant message you if you're hooked up with Facebook. What we do during the workshop, we want to make sure you have one of our team members aligned with you. So if you have any questions, if you want any replays, if you want anything else, you're going to be able to get it. So again, kind of look for that in your Facebook group. All information is going to be sent to you via an email from Kenny Brown. In the Facebook group, you will have posts in there giving you direction. All the replays will be in there and in the newsletter. One more little thing I want to let you know, Kenny is giving away a gift certificate, $100 gift certificate tonight, and he will be doing that the next 4 days, and he has a really unique way of choosing the people, whoever wins. So stay tuned, and he will be giving it way closer to the end. Brad, how are we doing on letting people in? Can you give me a thumbs up or something?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, good.
Got
So
55 people in here. We just added a new person, Melvin.
I have quite a few more
And
coming
Jim.
in. Brad, can you check with Bridget and see how she's doing if the people are joining us? Again, if you're just joining, I want to welcome you. This is Carrie from Kenny Brown Performance. You are attending the Transform Your Driving Experience workshop, and we are having a few technical difficulties with Facebook, so we're going to delay it just a minute or two to make sure all those Facebook people can transfer over to the Zoom meeting. It's a good thing we did this because Facebook has been having horrible issues for the last couple of months. And so we planned ahead, and that's why we're on 2 different mediums right now. Let's see what Bridget has to say to me. Okay. So anyway, I think, Kenny, we may start with you. Again, thank you for joining us. Kenny is going to be coming on live. Ask questions in your chat as you listen to Kenny, and at the end, he will be answering questions. And don't forget about that $100 gift certificate he's going to be giving away at the end. So Kenny, do you want to take it over?
Well, I guess I should. And as she mentioned, this is the first time we've tried doing Zoom and Facebook, because Facebook, the issues with Facebook, but we're working on it. So that's why we're switching everybody over to Zoom, because we were testing it before and it wasn't working very well at all. So, okay, I guess we should roll. I mean, we've got a number of people, and people keep joining. As you imagine, I'm Kenny Brown, and this is a workshop I'm going to do. In fact, I've done several of them before in the past, and they've always been really well received. So, bell keeps ringing. People keep coming in. That's very cool. Okay. So why do I do this? Well, there's a good reason for that. I tell people, hello, Brad. I tell people that the 2 worst places to get information about your car is the internet and the paddock. And we'll elaborate more on that in a little bit. But I mean, a while back, in fact, over a year ago, Carrie had the idea. We have so many people ask me questions. Carrie had the idea, well, why don't we do a little, cars and coffee on Saturday morning? And so I just started, sitting in front of the camera, answering a few questions, and that grew and grew and grew. And, people, I try to share what I know. I don't know everything, but I do know a lot. Probably because I've been doing this for 50 years. And my background is predominantly professional motorsports and building great cars, race cars, street cars, track cars. I mean, that's what I've been doing. So over those years, I've accumulated a whole wealth of knowledge and information. And at this point in my career, it's like, okay, I can't take it with me, so why not share it? Which is what we've been doing through the workshops, and then do like smaller workshops. And then we also, people are even craving more information, so we did the academy, which we'll talk about in a couple of days, Speed Therapy Academy. So, so what is my background that I can propound on all this? Well, back in the 70s, basically, I worked on a lot of foreign cars. I was in the late 60s, early 70s, it was like American muscle cars. Then I switched over to foreign cars, a lot of British cars, Italian cars, Japanese cars. And I really liked the way that, they drove. I just liked the way they drove. We need something to mute there. Yeah, I like the way they drove, and I kind of carry that forward. And when I moved over into American cars, I just carried that whole thing with me. How did I get to American cars? Well, back in the early 80s, I was doing sports cars and we're doing a lot of custom builds on very unique cars. And then a friend of mine was in California. He actually he was a doctor that has a partner in a Ford dealership. And he saw an article about this guy in California that's building these kind of cool cars, Mustangs. So he was in California on some sort of conference. So he swung by the office and sat down and started chatting with Steve Saleen, and only to find out that Steve had just got his Saleen Mustangs homologated for the SCCA Pro Endurance Series. But there he was. He had his homologation, and he had one car, and he was stuck. So the long story short is my friend Dan put me together with Steve. I flew out and met with him during the Long Beach Grand Prix, and we put a deal together. And pretty much, we after that, we sent some money to Steve. We had to build the first car in Sacramento because it was so close. The first race was in Sears Point, which is across from San Francisco. And it was so close in time that we built the first car at Fred's shop, in the body shop in Sacramento. We ran Sears Point. Even though it was kind of a cluster for the first time, we did reasonably well. And we went straight up to Portland, and we did kind of pretty well up there too, even though we really hadn't got our stuff together yet. And after Portland, Steve got the go-ahead from General Tire to build a second car. So we shipped the first car back. At that point, my shop was in Omaha. We shipped the car back to Omaha, and we built a second car. And the Saleen race team started. And the things that are notable, first of all, the 86 cars were just terrible to drive. To race. They were great. They were sturdy. Their strongest point is they were just tough and durable. You could just beat the crap out of them for 24 hours and they would just keep going, which was a real strength when you have to run against Porsche. But it's like we kept doing better and better. But the real breakthrough was the 24 Hours of Canada up at Motorsports. When we were leading the race with primary car, and 4 o'clock in the morning, it was a big crash. They pulled it back to the pits, and it was just totally unrepairable. So at that point, we had to focus on the second car. And that was actually running, I can't remember, third or fourth at the time, and it was wounded. It had gotten into a little altercation early, and we can only run 30 minutes on a tank of gas, and we had to keep making pit stops and some other issues with it. Anyway, we focused on that car, brought it from the back, just really through strategy and luck, we made it through and actually won the race, the GT class. So that was kind of like the big breakthrough for the Saleen R Mustangs and the Saleen race team. In '87, over the winter, with the end of the season, I came up with a great big long list for Steve. Okay, if you want, because I told him when we first did the deal, I said, if you get me the resources and people, within 3 years, I will try to win you a championship. Okay. So, the winning the 24 Hours of Canada was like a big push. But the cars really were not up to really competing at the level they needed to be. So, I gave Steve a whole list of things that we needed to adjust for the '87 season. Between Steve, myself, and the guys at Ford, some other things, we kind of put together a huge improvement in the '87 Saleen Mustangs. So, and we ended up running 3 cars in '87. A long story short, we won the 24 Hours of Canada again. We finished first, third, and fourth. If it weren't for that pesky Porsche, we'd had a clean sweep. but the thing just, that Porsche just barely held on for 24 hours. If it would have been 25 hours, we would have got first, second. Uh-oh, we got somebody that should be muted, or, and Brad, can you fix that at all? Yeah, somebody needs to turn their video off and turn their mute off. You can take care of that or not, Brad. Any, not getting any up here. Can we figure out who that is?
So somebody is in a red polo shirt. Can you please mute yourself?
Mute yourself and turn your video off.
You are the center of attention right now, whoever is in the red shirt, polo shirt. Thank you very much. So mute yourself and we should be good.
Okay, I still have that on my screen. I haven't gone back to my screen.
Well, just keep talking and we'll see what we can do here, Kenny.
Okay, where did I leave off? Okay, okay, 87. Okay, we went back and finished first, third, and fourth. And long story short, I got lots of stories. In the 87, we ended up doing a clean sweep, all 4 national championships. So I gave Steve not only 1 championship, but 4 in only 2 years. So at that point, you know, we said, thank you very much. He went his way, I went my way. You know, my job was done. And all of a sudden, Mustang started showing up at my front door. Carrie, do you still see somebody other than me on the screen?
Yes, we're working on it, Ken. We can control it. I'm having problems.
There
we go. Yay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now I lost my train. And I was late to the station too. Okay. So anyway, you know, my Mustang background started with the Salines in 86 and 87. I mean, before that, the year before that, I was building custom, like really custom Jaguars. And before that, I was running the March Sports 2000 program. SCCA Sports 2000s are like a little mini prototype, small open cockpit prototype, 2-seater. They ran the Ford 2-liter overhead cam motor. And there was a Midwest Pro Series back then, and I was working with the March people on that. We got a couple of lap records and ended up finishing runner-up in the championship, which was pretty cool. And before that, I ran the shop for the Skip Barber program at Road America, and that was it could have been a worse job. I mean, living at Road America for an entire season was kind of cool. I not only looked after the Saline school car, the Skip Barber school cars, but also I was the crew chief for the Midwest Racing Series. And because we're at Road America, I got to meet a whole bunch of interesting people. Like I say, that's how I got in touch with the people from March. They were kind of like camped there for the season, and they only had one mechanic, so I kind of jumped in and I was number 2 mechanic. So I mean, and then background from there, I mean, it's like I've been racing sports cars. That's been about it since forever. So without getting too much deeper into that, so anyway, that's how in 88, we're sitting around after the Saline program trying to think, okay, what do we do next? Because I had been doing so much racing over the years, I was looking for another racing program. And, back then, racing programs didn't like fall out of the sky. You had to really look for them. And while looking for that, all of a sudden somebody drove up with a Mustang and said, hey, can you do to mine what you did to the Saline cars? Sure, that's not a problem. We already had like between 3 cars, 2 years, practice, racing.
Hey, Kenny, can you unmute yourself, please?
How did I get muted?
I just did it. The power of me.
Oh, okay. So, he did it again. Where was I? Yeah, you're laughing. And you put me on the spot. I forget where I was. So anyway, I've got a pretty deep background in Mustangs as well as sports cars and professional racing. After the Salines, I focused on both mostly racing and sports cars. And something that I'm going to do, we did it last time and people thought it was kind of cool, is take a little trip down memory lane and wear some of my crew shirts from way back when. This one, I'll back up a little bit. This is Grand American Road Racing. I don't know if any of you remember that, but back around 99 and 2000, Grand Am was formed. And Grand Am, the foundation for Grand Am was the 24 Hours of Daytona. And back then, I worked for a few different people off and on for 24 Hours of Daytona, one of my favorite races. So that's what that's from. And then also the Speed GT. Speed GT is what the Escort, the Pro Endurance Series. Okay, got another one. Escort Endurance Series turned into the Speed GT on Speed Vision. Later turned into the World Challenge. So that's kind of, I mean, I've always been hanging around racing. I mean, I've crewed or engineered for cars, all kinds of sports cars, all kinds of prototypes, you know, I worked for many different people at the 24 Hours of Daytona. I've worked for a few people, crew people at Indy 500. And when we, you know, being in Indianapolis, when a team's looking for crew, the first place they go is within the industry, even if it's for the simplest things. Like I was running the tires back and forth for Lynn's program one year. And the reason they do that is because they don't want to have time to train anybody. They want somebody from the industry they can say, okay, do this job, and they just do it. So, I mean, I've got lots of experience. And then kind of like the pinnacle of my racing career, after which I really kind of backed away from racing quite a bit, was in 2011. I helped my late son, Paul Brown, win the Pirelli World Challenge GTS Championship in a Boss Mustang. It was kind of a special one because he wanted to start the season in the beginning of the season because he wanted to run for the championship, but Ford didn't have the cars ready. So what we did is he built one himself. In fact, there was a video, a little video of him building a race car in 30 days with a whole bunch of people. Anyway, long story short, I worked with him. I was his coach, dad, mentor, and long story short, he dominated the 2011 Pirelli World Challenge GTS series. He won 5 races, which tied Pernell Jones' single season win record in a Boss Mustang at 5. Plus, he all kinds of, we got tons of fastest laps, tons of poles, and he actually, at the end of the season, he led more laps than all the rest of the competitors combined. And at the end, we won all 3 championships. So, I mean, it's like, you know, when it comes to Mustangs in professional racing, I mean, that's sort of what my background is. And that's what I kind of carry to the street. And we've done tons and tons of track cars, lots of track cars. And track cars are kind of like just light versions of race cars. So anyway, that's kind of my background. I mean, I've been building cars, doing racing for a lot of years. I've got a lot of knowledge, and you know, what I teach is not something I heard from the guy down the street or read on the internet. What I teach and share with you guys is things I've learned myself. And, you know, I've made lots and lots of mistakes over the last 50 years. And if I can help you, any of you, just save you from making just one mistake, that's just a good day for me. In fact, I forgot to introduce my toolbox. See that? That toolbox has been with me for a long time. It has been every major racetrack in North America, most of them 2 or 3 times, even up into Canada.
So Kenny, guess what? I think you've been a time waster long enough. I think we have whatever Facebook people are going to be coming over, so you can start your program.
Okay. Well, so much my background. I will move on now that we got everybody here. Okay, that's Carrie's page. Here we go. Transform your driving experience workshop day 1. Okay, here's what we're kind of going to do over the next 4 days. The first day is first critical step to maximize your driving experience. 5 components to the performance platform, keys to building a performance platform, dialing in your car for maximum performance and refining your driving technique, and track prep. Okay, and I think this will go along with your workbook that's there. The first critical steps, and so many people miss this. The first critical steps is planning. And then before you can improve your driving experience, you really need to think about improving your car, because the better the car drives, the better experience you have. It's not just knowing how to drive, it's knowing how to build, set up, align, tune, manage your car. I mean, all that's important. Now, the thing that everybody should have, and I am such a strong proponent on this, is notebooks. I'll stop sharing here for a minute. Notebooks. Everything I do with cars and racing, there are notebooks involved. This is the notebook for Ruby, my track car. You can see all the little dividers in there. Every one of those dividers is a different track event. And all the information from each track events in there, the tire temperatures, the pressures, the adjustments. I save all kinds of other things, the best hotels where the parts stores are. So, I mean, if you're doing track days, then you really need to look at a notebook for just one event in every section. And then when you go back to, because in racing, you always go back to the same tracks. Over and over again, you're always going back to the same tracks. So next time you go back to that track, you just open up your notebook, look at the pressures you ran, look at the adjustments you made, and there you start where you left off rather than from the beginning. Now, if you're building a car, then you should have a notebook that just has everything in that's building the car. See, as far as racing notebooks, okay, this is my notebook from the Mustang Challenge, 2009, 2010. I engineered the 3 Speedworks FR500S cars for the Mustang Challenge. And let's see. And then if you're building a car, you need to have a build book. Now, I was contracted to engineer and help start a World Challenge team. I forget what year it was. Anyway, this was the build book I put together for building the car. They wanted to run it's a S550. They wanted to run the EcoBoost, but Ford, was it S550 or 197? I can't remember. Anyway, they wanted to run EcoBoost, and Ford said, no, you can't do that. We're not going to support you. So they said you can run a V6. So they ran a V6. I helped them put it together. So there's one notebook for the build and another notebook for the races. I helped them to good part of the series, and then they were doing well enough that they carried on their own. So I mean, notebooks are silly important. If you're at the track or if you're doing something, and if you think you're going to remember, okay, all right, did it again. Okay, if you think you're going to remember, then you're not. I guarantee you're not going to remember. I mean, trust me, everything will get in the way. You'll forget. So that's why it's so important to write everything down in your notebook. So I got lots and lots of notebooks. If you don't have one or two, I suggest you start them, because it will save your life. Okay, moving right along. Okay, now these are the 5 steps in performance planning. One is begin with the end in mind. Second, are you going to build? But building with the end in mind, I mean, you need to know where you're going to end up. I mean, if you don't know where you're going to end up, how are you going to know how to get there? It's just like, most people, when they go on a trip, they just don't start out unless they're on a real adventure. You kind of know where you want to be, and then you map your way there. So you should do the same thing with a car. And whether it's going to be this year, next year, the year after that, you figure out where you want to be and just work backwards from there and build your car so towards that goal. And then you need to figure out, am I building a street car, a track car, or a race car? Or is it a street car, track car, or a track car, street car? Because the contenting in each one of those is a little bit different. Of course, the race car is a lot different. But you need to be sure that you're putting the right parts into the car that you're building. I mean, you don't want to put race car parts in the street car, and you definitely don't want to put street car parts in a race car. The next one is something that most people fail to think about, and that's align your budget with your expectations. So many times people will call me and they have a list of things they want to do to their car, and they run down this big long list. I say, okay, do you have any idea what this is going to cost? And they really hadn't thought about that. And when I tell them an idea what it's going to cost, the phone goes silent. So think about your budget and your expectations, and maybe you need to budget over 2 or 3 years. That's fine. You just need to do it in such a way that you don't have to back up and redo things. That's where, I mean, if you're struggling with that, Then what you need to do is, I mean, you can set up a 15-minute consult and I can help you lay out a plan. We'll talk about that more later. And then the other thing I would say, if you got a $10,000 budget, start with $5,000. Spend your first $5,000 and then see how much is left over. Because things always cost more than you think they will, and there's everything takes longer, it costs more. So once you spend your first $5,000, if it's only $6,000, then you got more to spend. But in the meantime, just make your first budget under budget, because it's better to add more than to get stuck with not enough. And here's another important one: follow a proven philosophy and stick with it. There's a lot of different companies out there selling a lot of different parts. My suggestion now, whether it's my philosophy or somebody else's philosophy, whichever one you pick, whichever one you're most comfortable with, stick with it. One of the worst calls I get is people call up and they say, well, my car is really handling poorly. I mean, what can I do? And we'll start running down the list of parts, and they've got the shocks from this company, the springs from somebody else, this part from somebody else. They've got just a menagerie of parts from different people. Well, inadvertently, what they've done is they started their own R&D project, and what they have found out is it was not successful. By sticking with a proven philosophy like mine or another manufacturer, if you stick with them, buy all the stuff that's within their philosophy, then it's really easy for them to help. Like, for people that buy into our program, if somebody calls up, they're at the track, the car's doing this, the car's doing that, we're talking about tire pressures and temperatures, and then I know what's in their car. And it's very easy for me to say, okay, click a rebound here, I click a bump there. I can help, because the stuff that we sell, only sell what we use. That's why our e-commerce is a lot smaller than most people, and we don't have a gazillion of everything. We only sell the parts I use in the cars I build. So we have absolutely top-notch technical support, because this is stuff we use every day. And then that also goes in, choose carefully while you buy your parts. If you're not sticking with a philosophy and you just want to pick up some parts here and there, please don't look for the cheapest parts. Sometimes the most expensive parts might be out of reach, but see if you can find something in the middle. The cheap parts are the most expensive parts you can buy. That's because that they don't last. They break, or they're not very good, and you have to go back and buy something else. So choose your parts wisely. Okay, now here's we're starting into my world. Real speed is in the chassis. Why do I say that? Because it's true. Developing a strong chassis performance platform translates into handling and improved ride quality. If you ever watched a NASCAR race, you never see them. If a guy starts at the race and he tells his crew chief the car's junk, you never see him pop the hood and adjust the carburetor or fuel injection. What do? They work on the chassis. And a lot of times, a car that's junk in the beginning of the race, they keep working on it every pit stop, and by the end of the race, they're up front. And I can tell you that it's all about getting around a corner. For track days, getting around a corner and getting off a corner. Even if it's going like around through canyons, it's all about keeping that car planted, making it work. So I'll give you another good example. In my 2012 GT4 RS, it has full suspension, great brakes. It had a Coyote motor, but only with cold air kit, headers, and a tune. So it wasn't any huge fire-breathing monster. But nevertheless, you would think that a track like Road America with big, long straightaways that's considered a power track, you'd think that a GT500, with all their power, would just dominate. I can tell you that at Road America, I go past GT500s like they're sitting still. And the reason is because I got a chassis that works. I can carry a really good mid-corner speed and extremely good corner exit speed. And real speed is all about corner exit speed, and we'll get into that later on. The harder you get off a corner, the faster you're going to be on the straightaway. Like I say, the way my suspensions are set up, my foot is into the gas before the apex. After the apex, it's flat on the floor, and I'm really launching out the corner. With like a GT500, they get a big heavy front end. They're hard to slow down. They're lazy on turn in and mid corner. They're not really strong in mid corner. And when you go to exit the corner, you can't put your foot down, but you do, the rear tires smoke. So that's why I say the real speed is in the chassis. The absolute last thing we do on cars is go to performance and power. We're going to get to the performance platform here in a minute. And here it is. These are my 5 secrets to building great cars, whether it's a street car, a track car, or a race car. I build the performance platform first, and that's chassis, suspension, wheels, tires, brakes. You do all these first, and you build a performance platform, and you'd be surprised how little, if it's a track car, how little power you need. If it's a high-performance street car, you'd be amazed how much fun it is to drive. So that's why I always tell people, you start with the basics, build a foundation. It's like building a house. If you have no foundation, the house is going to fall down. If you've got a performance car that has really no foundation, just lots of power, it's not going to work. So you need to build that performance foundation first. Some other elements we'll talk about a little on is some safety, cooling, and aero. And aero, by the way, is the very last thing I look at. We always, in developing a platform, we'll get the mechanical grip first. And once we got good mechanical grip, then we will add aero to it. Because if you add aero in the beginning and don't have good mechanical grip, I mean, you don't know what's happening. You might actually be worse. In fact, I had somebody call the other day that was doing a lot of kind of like rally type things up north somewhere. And he just couldn't keep up with some of the, it's like, I think it was an EcoBoost maybe. He couldn't keep up with some of the better sports cars, like through the corners and stuff. So he wanted to know on aero, should he do a wing or a splitter first? And I said, neither. Go to your chassis, go to your suspension. So I talked him into doing a really good set of springs and shocks, and because that kind of changed the whole car. And he didn't have to go into aero, which would have been not the smart thing to do. Okay, so we're going to try to get through as much as we can today. We had a little bit of a late start because of technical difficulties and people switching over from Facebook. And I had to chat more than I was planning on. And Carrie had to chat more than she's planning on. So let's see if I can catch up a little bit. Chassis, suspension, we're going to talk about today. Okay, let's start with the chassis. When it comes to chassis, whether it's a street car, a race car, track car, a rigid platform makes the best performance. What do I mean by rigid? Well, these are the cars I worked on. These are the race cars I worked on back in the 70s. These are SCCA open wheel Formula Fords and Super Vs. And if you notice, there's a tube frame, but there's lots of little triangulations. Okay, triangles are the strongest engineering design there is. So that's why I see lots of triangulations in this chassis and lots more triangulations up here, because the stiffer you make the chassis, the better the car works. And this kind of takes it to the extreme. This is the 917 before monocoque or carbon fiber came around, and you can just see, it's like gazillion little tubes and triangles, because they're trying to get the rigidest platform there is. Now here's another, like a little bigger car, Pratt & Miller Trans Am car. Again, triangles, triangles, triangles. Lots of tubing, making that chassis stiff. Because if the chassis isn't stiff, then the car becomes a fifth and unwanted and uncontrollable suspension member. And when you look at a production car of today, it's a bunch of stamped out sheet metal. They're all spot welded together by robots, and there's no triangles, which means in essence they're kind of like a tin can, beer can or soda can. You can twist it and it'll flex like crazy. We were doing a lot of Fox cars in the 80s and 90s. We even had people come in with their Fox that the floor pan was actually torn between the outer rail and went right across behind the driver's seat and up the tunnel. So that's how flimsy the SN95 or Fox cars were, is they would actually twist so much they would split the chassis. So what I'm going to talk about as we go through is the problems that I've run across and the solutions that I've come up with to solve the problems. Again, based on a lot of years. So what we did for the Fox and then carried over the SN95 is we really needed to stiffen up the chassis. And the first thing that we did was the jacking rails. And that's a carryover from the Celine cars. In '86, we put jacking rails on the cars. You do a 24-hour race, you're going to jack up the car a whole bunch, change tires and brakes. Being able to jack an entire side up at the time, get both tires serviced at the same time is huge. SCCA initially thought in '86 that was an addition to the unibody for strength. And so what I had to do is I had to take a hacksaw and cut just two little, barely cut the surface lines here and here, so it was not considered a full-length support. Anyway, in '87, they didn't even bother us. So after the Celine cars, and we have full cage in them, which really, helped. The jacking rails were for jacking it up with full cage, helped for chassis rigidity. But for the Fox cars, without doing a full cage, the first thing we came up with after the jacking rail was a subframe connector. We attached the front and rear subframe connector, and I put this unique cross end. We call it the double cross subframe connectors. And this is back, gosh, this had to be real early '90s that we did this. If you look around the market today, there's tons of other people have copied the double cross design, and the purpose of this is we could increase the captured versus free span ratio by bolting the cross piece to the bottom of the seat. So two things: one, instead of being complete free span from front to back, there's just shorter free spans. And then also by putting this T in here, it's kind of like doing, I don't know if you ever did a yard sign for sale sign. If you just put the sign on one stick, it's going to blow all over the place. But if you put a T-bar underneath, it's going to keep it straight. Well, same principle. Keep it straight, keep it from flexing. So we got the jacking rails, the subframe connector, and then I added the matrix brace. A lot of people copy all my stuff. Nobody's really copied the matrix brace. I don't understand why, because it's a great piece. And if you look, talking triangles, we end up 1, 2, 3, 4 triangulations per side. That adds a huge amount of rigidity. We've had people come in, we've installed the matrix system, and before they even get out of the parking lot, they'll call back on the phone and say, God, this is a different car. So, you really need to get the chassis still. The other thing, it reduces squeaks and rattles, and then it also improves ride quality. You think by making the chassis more rigid, to make ride quality worse, just the opposite. It takes the body out from being a suspension member that you can't control. Now, when 197s came along, it was like great news, because they already put in a full-length channel down the middle of the car. So there's no need for subframe connectors because the subframes were connected already. So all we really had to do, add a jacking rail and the matrix, and boom, there we are, same thing. Got 4 triangulations per side. We had one customer who's now doing track days and running our full suspension say that he called me, he said that he'd heard a lot about us, and he was unsure because there's so much misinformation out there, that he thought he'd start with just the chassis support, the jacking rails and subframe matrix brace. He said it made such a huge improvement in the car that he just kept buying stuff from us. And right now he's got our latest and greatest suspension, and he's just having a ball of track days. Okay, the other thing that we did back in the early days is 3-point strut tire brace. Now, the Celine cars in '86, they had, you think the cars today, if you had a Mustang on track, you talk about understeer, well, back then it was even worse. So what I came up with to help combat, make the front of the car turn, was a 3-point strut tire brace. We showed up at Road Atlanta in '86 with 3-point strut tire braces on the car, on both cars, and it really worked. It made a huge improvement in getting around the corner. It made the front work a lot better. Not perfect, but better. Unfortunately, the SCCA came up and said, well, that's not part of the production car, so you can run it this weekend, but don't bring it back to the next race. So, in my list of things for Steve for the '87 season, believe it or not, when the '87 cars came out, there was a 3-point strut tire brace on the production cars. And even Ford copied that in 95. Anyway, we had a lot of strut tire braces back on the Fox days. Right now, the only one we have in production is for the 0304 Cobras. We've got so much going on, we just haven't had a chance to bring most of them back yet. If there's enough demand at some point, we'll bring them back. But we've got so much going on right now. Okay, and then for the 197s, we did 3-point to tie in let me go back. Even though you think this looks like one triangle. If you really look at it, it's actually three triangles. You've got the main triangle from the strut tower brace, but if you draw a line from here to there to there, there to there to there, you add two more triangulations. So that's why it works just so darn good. Now the 197s, this is not a firewall. This is just one thin piece of sheet metal. And I didn't see any real value in tying into that, so just a 2-point strut tower brace. So we can help channel the loads as load come in one side, channel across the other side. Again, to kind of help the front be more stable and get through the corner better. Now, something else we did in chassis stiffening for the SN95s, we do a lot of 99 to 04 Cobras, and lately we've been helping a lot of guys put IRSs in their Foxes. When we do, we convert to a coilover. And because of that, we developed a 30-point rear shock tower brace. And last Speed Therapy Academy, one of our guys, let me take a drink here. One of our guys sent in a picture of somebody that put coilovers on, didn't have a shock tower brace, and actually the shock tower split away from the body and just came away. So we kind of combated that with our, again, little triangulation, 3 points. Now for the 197 cars, we really hadn't run into any problem using coilovers in the back of the car. I mean, the frame rails were a lot stronger back then. There, we do have a 2-point strut tower brace, rear shock tower brace in the line to be done. We've got a prototype, but we just have not had time to get to it. And it's kind of like it's the squeakiest wheel, gets the most grease. And, we really haven't had the super need with the coilovers in the back. We just haven't had problems. So it's on the list. Okay, kind of flying through here. Suspension. Suspension is, to me, the most important part of the car. The suspension is what gets you around the corner, gets you down the street, gets you through the canyon. And the better your suspension, the better it's going to feel. So we're going to talk about types of suspension. McPherson strut, most of you are probably familiar with because that's what all Mustangs are, except for the 550s, even though they're still a strut. And the double wishbone. There's another version called the SLA, stands for short arm, long arm. The SLA, the double wishbone, the upper arm is shorter. That's why it's called short arm, long arm. So you get McPherson strut or a double wishbone front. And they were completely different. I mean, this pretty much goes straight up and down. This kind of moves on an arc. Now here's a picture of a Fox with the, the front K-member, control arms, the strut, and the spring-on control arm. Now, I told you, back in the Celine days, we had trouble getting them to turn in '86. We had the strut tower brace, which helped them a lot. But I was working with one of my friends in Ford Engineering, who was in the suspension, and we started in '86. Just talking back and forth. And he spent evenings, working on their big computers, and we just talked about, what can we do to the front of the car to get the thing to turn? And we would run a whole bunch of different scenarios. And we finally got to the point, like in the beginning '87, where we thought some modifications that we could do would really help the cars. The only problem is this, in theory, was a showroom stock class, so everything had to be quote production. Well, leave it to the magic of Steve, and all of a sudden at the airport, so I got a call. I went out to the airport, and here's 3 brand new K members with no holes in them whatsoever, 0 holes. They're totally virgin. Well, I sent everybody home, and I spent the entire night putting my own holes in them based off of what we had come up with, what the computer said would be an improvement. And next day people looked at them and they couldn't tell the difference between the K members that I did and a stock one unless you look really close and notice every single hole on there had been moved to improve the front geometry. And that kind of set off my whole thing on Mustang geometry. As we've gone through the years, I have something called AGS. That's Advanced Geometry Suspension Systems. Well, this was actually 1.0 on the SN90 or on the Fox Celine cars. We actually improved on that. We went to AGS 1, AGS 2, which was we added like the fixed strut and a bunch of other improvements. Initially, we made all the same modifications for street cars we did for track cars. But I came to the realization that 99.99% of people on the street could not tell the difference. It was mostly for like full-on competition. So we dropped down and only did the most important things. And in 2000, for the SEMA show, we did a clean sheet of paper K-member in which I made geometry changes, and we did our own control arms. And that kind of started AGS 3.0. And we also had kind of like a really nice rear suspension package called Rear Grip, Track Kit Plus, which was axle brackets to change the anti-squat in the back, and a panner bar to change the roll center. And we'll get to that a little later on. So anyway, this is what we came up with, and this is about the only design of this I've ever seen. And let me I got one sitting here. I'll pull up for you. By going to this design, we actually get 2 triangulations, but it is super, super strong. The FEA, finite element analysis, just showed that was incredibly strong. And the thing that we do in any of my stuff, we go for strength first, and then if we happen to save some weight, that's just a big plus. So that was the kind of, you can't hold a big K-member up here because it'll just take up everything. I didn't want to do that. Let's see. So that's what we came up with, and we had it on our track car that was at SEMA in 2000, 2001. I can't remember exactly what year. That started at AGS 3.0. And then moving to the rear suspension, there's 3 basic types of live axle rear suspension. There's a parallel 4-link, a triangulated, which is self-centering, and a 3-link, which is like what's in S197s. Now, the thing with anytime you've got parallel control arms, you need something for lateral control. Otherwise, the whole thing will just swing back and forth. So with that, this is like an S197. You got a 3-link with a panner bar. The panner bar represents lateral control. Now, this is a double splay, which is total self-centering, and because everything kind of pulls against each other, and it keeps the axle centered. Now, this is Fox S95 rear axle, and you can see the upper control arms are splayed out around 45 degrees. The lower control arms are splayed in a little bit. It's self-centering, but the geometry is just terrible. There's a thing we're going to talk about later called the roll center, the point that the back of the car wants to roll around. In these cars, the roll center is like 17, 18 inches off the ground up in the trunk, which is why the back of the car wants to roll so much going around the corner. When we did our panner bar, we used the panner bar not to center the axle because it already is self-centering. We used the panner bar to defeat the factory roll center and move it down to the bottom of the differential. And the bottom of the differential for a roll center is really key. That goes all the way back to my Trans Am days. What we did, we would put a Watts link on the bottom of the differential horizontally to locate the axle. Watts link being the best way to locate an axle. And that way we got the roll center at the very bottom of the differential. It was easy on those cars that had an underslung chassis, so you just go over and tie onto the frame. Now, what's turned out to be pretty popular with Mustangs, especially on the West Coast, is torque arms. I'm just not a torque arm fan at all. I've had personal experiences with them in experiencing the negative things of torque arms, and the geometry is just not that great, and it's fixed. Let me do a quick stop here. Now, I learned about a long time ago. This is kind of like my master book, Race Car Vehicle Dynamics, and there's a lot of pages that are pretty dog-eared in here, especially in the suspension department. And one of the suspensions they just don't like is the torque arm. It's very limited on what it can do, and it's not particularly good in really hard braking. I was driving a customer. We built some Cobras for a couple of customers, and the Cobra twins, and we're running them out at Putnam. And I was driving one of their, I can't remember, the Camaro Firebird. Let's see. I mean, the torque arm was first introduced in 1924. I think it was pretty much reintroduced on the Camaros, the F-body cars, and I think that was just purely packaging. But there's real problems under braking, under hard braking, really hard braking. You stand it on the nose, and all of a sudden, you know, the back will start hopping all over the place. I experienced that firsthand, and to me, someone that uses a torque arm really doesn't have a good grasp or understanding of rear suspension geometry or how to make it work. And we're going to get into that a little more. Here's some examples of torque arms. And the other thing about a torque arm is they weigh a ton. I mean, this is a great big heavy chunk of steel that you're bolting onto the axle. Think about it, if you're lifting like, say, a small axle, a little small axle up and down, and you're lifting up and down, you know, quickly. If you drop a whole bunch more weight on there, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to take more energy and effort to lift, and your movements are going to be slower. The same thing happens with an axle. You add a whole bunch of weight to it, and it's unsprung mass, and it just takes more time and more energy for the rear suspension to react. And here we go. This is a torque arm with a Watts link. Now, a Watts link, I said, is the best way to locate an axle. And on the Trans Am cars, we put them on the bottom of the differential so it's horizontal. The problem with a Watts link is wherever this pin is, you know, the center pin on the bell crank, that's your roll center. And you can see what here, I mean, the roll center in S197 Mustang with the panner bar. Now, with a car with a panner bar, wherever the panner bar crosses the center line of the car, that's the roll center. And on a 197, it's like way up here mid-axle. This only moves the roll center down maybe an inch or so. And here, the roll center is still pretty high. Well, this is my solution to the roll center issue. It's called our roll center relocation kit. And in essence, what it is, it moves the panner bar all the way down. This is the standard hole. This is the hole it goes into. It moves it down like over 4 inches to the bottom of the differential. That means that the car, when it goes to the corner, it doesn't want to roll up as hard in the back. It doesn't want to roll all that weight on the outside front tire, which means you can get to the gas sooner. Now, in my S197 suspension, I mean, there's only 3 components: the rear grip kit, the front grip kit, and springs and shocks. Now, here's the S197. When S197s came out, I was ecstatic. The reason being, you know, the Fox and SN95s, they had the double splay in the back, really bad geometry. They had the displayed front control arms, which it adds some challenges in getting good geometry. But in 2005 with 197, all of a sudden they got a 3-link in the back with a panner bar, like woohoo! And then all of a sudden the front control arms are parallel to center line, which makes so much easier to improve the geometry, and I did. This is the front grip kit. Like I say, there's front grip kit and rear grip kit. This is the front grip kit, and there's only like 3 elements to it: the control arms, the K-member, and the bump steer tie rod ends. You know, the bump steer tie rod ends are OE type design, longer shank, so there's nothing, you don't have to worry about like a rod end getting loose or rattling or having to figure out what the bump steer is yourself. That just takes care of it for you. The thing is that the reason I say this is the front grip kit and the rear grip kit is each one of these is a system that's engineered to work together to achieve a specific outcome. And with this, it's like the K-member is engineered to work with the control arm. The control arm is engineered to work with the K-member. And let me show you something real quick on the control arm. This is a 197 control arm, and this one is just getting ready to be built out. And you can see how strong and stout this is. It doesn't have the ball joint in it yet. And we only make lower control arms for 11 to 14 Mustangs. Why do we do that? Because of the ball joint. This is the ball joint of 5 to 10. And as you can see, for the clevis bolt, it's curved all the way around. But what we were finding, we always extend the shank on the ball joint so we can bring the front roll center up. Front roll center. We were the first people to use an extended shaft ball joint on Mustangs. This had to be in the early 90s. And the only thing that was available at the time with any kind of extended shank was for an ASS stock car. And just, of course, because it's a stock car, it was GM, so we had to modify the spindles so we could bring the roll center up. So, but we're finding out with this, when you make them longer, and with all this groove around here, that becomes a weak point. And in 2011, when Ford did all the upgrades, we went to a 19 millimeter ball joint. And as you can see, you can twist this around, instead of being grooved all the way around, there's only a little bitty notch to put the clevis bolt through. And it's easy to locate because you just put a wrench on it and twist. So that's why we don't do any of the 5 to 10 control arms anymore, just 11 to 14. The cars that come in or people that have those cars, we recommend they get to start looking at salvage yards. Get yourself a set of spindles from 11 to 14. I mean, it's better, it's safer, it's stronger. So that's why we don't do the early ones anymore. So, and the interesting thing when we do, like for the SN95 K member, it was built for strength, but we saved like 40 pounds in weight. So that was just kind of, the weight savings is purely a bonus. I think we probably save about the same on 197s. Now here's the rear grip kit. Remember, I said everything is engineered to work as a system. This is a rear grip system. Certainly there's parts, but every part is there to work with every other part. And the major ones are the upper control arm and the axle brackets work together to get the side view swing arm geometry, which creates is looking at it from the side. The instant center, and the instant center is what controls anti-squat, and anti-squat is grip, getting the tires to hook up. So those two work together. Now we've already talked about lowering the panner bar, so we bring the roll center down at the bottom of the differential. So the roll center down low, the car doesn't want to roll up as much. In fact, the front roll center with the long ball joints, we bring the front roll center up, the rear roll center down. So the car doesn't want to roll onto the front. It goes around the corner a lot faster, and if you're on track, you can get to the gas way sooner because you don't have to wait for the axle to settle. And then what we did, it's the control arms. I got some pieces I can show you here. I was going to have a lot of pieces, but we've just been going crazy. And our suspension has been sounding like actually crazy this summer. We've got tons of stuff in production right now. But here's my axle bracket. And you can see it's pretty simple. A lot of axle brackets out there have all this great big thing, and they've got tons of holes and stuff, and they're big and heavy. This is probably lighter than any other axle bracket. We tie into the axle itself up here with a 12 millimeter bolt, so it's locked in. And there's only one hole. There's only one hole because I've already figured out the side view geometry, the instant center, and the anti-squat that works the best for Mustangs. So between that and the upper control arm, which is a module, and that's why we sell it as a module, it's a complete unit, because the upper control arm is longer than factory, and the pickup point's been moved to work with the lower control arm, and with the axle brackets. Remember what I say about the lower control arm? This is our control arms. They're really light. They're really cool. Most companies use a 3/4 inch rod end. What I found is 3/4 inch rod ends are kind of big and clunky, and most of the ones people use are not that good at quality. We went to a 5/8. Use 5/8 on everything, and the rod bearings we use are super high grade, professional grade. They're the FK JMX series, which is super high. In fact, the rating on these are higher, even though it's 5/8, than most of the 3/4 inch rod ends throughout and other people's products. So, that's why I went to the 5/8, and it's light. This is like half the weight of other people's aftermarket products. And like I say, losing weight is good. Also, with the two different control arms, two different bushings. Remember, the front was kind of splayed out. Well, what we do is we bring that in, bring the back out, so they're parallel to center line. When they're parallel to center line, if you look down without getting too deep in geometry, because geometry comes up in the academy, looking down, if you draw the points of conversion from the control arms, it would be way behind the car. You put that to the roll center, it points up in the air, and the roll axis is all way off. So we make them parallel. There is no convergence. Convergence is infinity, and then the roll axis follows parallel to lower control arm. Something else we do that I don't know if anybody else does, but I've been doing it since forever. I'm screwing this to show you. But as we take this off, you can see there's a little difference in color on the threads. Well, that's anti-seize. Anytime we put anything that screws into something, we put anti-seize on. It's one to protect against dissimilar metals, and also just to make it easier when it's just easier to adjust. Even on our adjustable sway bar end links, again, you can see anti-seize. Again, dissimilar metals, anti-seize. Another little something is on anytime you see a control arm like this, if you see this knurling on one end, that tells you that's the left-hand thread. And if you look real close, I don't know if you can see the little notches in the nut. That's also telling you that's a left-handed thread. Even on our sway bar end links, there's a notch. You see the notches down here, and the notches on you can't really see them on the nut. That tells you it's left-handed thread. So anytime you see that, it's an easy way to tell left-handed or right-handed thread. Okay. So that's kind of like the rear grip kit. I mean, the axle brackets and the upper control arm work together on the instant center and the anti-squat to get the car to really hook up coming off the corners. The panner bar being lowered brings the roll center down, so the car doesn't want to roll up as much. Rear roll center down, front roll center up with the front K member. Also on the front K member, we had a whole bunch of anti-dive. So I mean, my cars, this suspension. I mean, you talk about braking. Braking in racing is the best opportunity to overtake people. I mean, if you watch races like road racing, it's always under braking for people trying to get by people. So whoever can brake the latest and the shortest is going to get the corner. And my entire suspension, the first thing in engineering the suspension, the first thing I looked at was braking. How do we improve braking? Had a whole bunch of anti-dive to the front, a whole bunch of anti-squat to the back. So you can brake really late and hard. Now, anti-squat, I say, get you off the corner. Well, the other side benefit is it keeps the back from jumping up in the air. So that's why, this is the AGS 4.0, fourth generation suspension. That's why they brake so good and so late, is because, the anti-dive in the front, which puts a lot of pressure on the tires fast, anti-squat in the back, but keeps the back of the car back of the car down, which means you can brake late and hard and get into a corner really deep. Now in racing, that's how you pass people. In track days, I just use it to intimidate. I mean, if there's somebody I want to get by, I'll just wait to a really hard braking corner and I'll come from way back and just, brake really late. And by the time, before they even get to the apex, I'm in all three of the mirrors. That usually kind of spooks them and they let me by. So, and keep moving along. We just talked about solid axle and independent. 99 to 04 Cobras came out with an independent rear suspension. And the advantage is it goes over bumps independently. Each one moves straight up and down, where on a live axle, everything moves in an arc. Okay, so here is, the SN95 IRS Cobra IRS package. And it's pretty heavy. Geometry is not that great, but it's kind of like an engineering marvel to package that into an existing SN95. Now, when the IRS came out in the Mustangs in '99, the Mustang world kind of like went crazy because they knew nothing about IRS. The first thing they did is try to take it to the drag strip and drag race them, and they found the whole back of the car bounced around. It didn't hook up. I mean, IRS is not for drag racing. Live axle is for drag racing. So, I mean, it's like when we did in 2001, when we redid the front K member and added new geometry at the front, we also did the IRS because we converted my SEMA car to IRS to make it like a Cobra. And, the reason this was no big deal, and I was really happy to see this, because back in the 70s, you can see I was working on cars like this. This is an IRS Spitfire. And, the Spitfires, the Triumphs, Datsuns, there's a lot of cars, sports cars I worked on back then, but the IRS. So, I mean, I was real familiar with IRS, how to work, how to make it work better. So when IRS came out, I was happy as can be. I knew how to make it work. Where everybody else just kind of went nuts and did all the wrong things. So how do I take a really decent factory IRS and make it better? In essence, this is what I did. I kind of did a whole bunch of improvements, and we actually do our IRS packages in 4 phases. The first phase is the forward torque brace and the aluminum diff bushings, which help stabilize the differential so it doesn't want to bounce around when you get on the gas hard. This forward torque brace is far, far stronger than the factory, and these aluminum diff bushings are solid, and they're aluminum, and they have a lot of washers that actually act like a little heat sink. And then we do the rear steer kit. Now, what I found when I was testing with Ford down at Road Atlanta on the FR 500 with the IRS, that at a certain point of roll, the back of the car would get really loose. And I went back and looked at my geometry program and discovered, yeah, once that Mustang got to a certain degree of roll, the rear wheels would steer the wrong way. That's why I got loose at the exact same place in the hard right-hand corners. So by moving the inner point down, it actually improves rear steer. So it doesn't want to do it as much. So that's the level 1. A level 2, we had a tubular lower control arm, and we convert to coilovers. Now this is a coilover bracket, and I actually have the rear coilovers are custom built for me by Strange. I went and we're in Chicago. I went over to Strange and said, it's taken me months to get these Conies, and people are waiting. So I took my notebook with all my different shock dynos in there, and I sat down with Dimitri, their shock guy, and I said, and I went through a bunch of, I said, this is what I kind of like as far as valving, and so he basically matched it. So they've been building our coilovers custom built, because everybody knows Strange is nothing more than a drag racing company. So we have very special shocks that they build. So we either have them single adjustable or double adjustable. So that's like step 2. And then, well, the nice thing about coilovers, you can adjust spring rate really easy. Just pull one spring up and another one on. And then the next step is putting the tubular upper control arms. Now there's no improvement in geometry, but they weigh less than half of the factory. So you're taking a whole bunch, factory ones are like cast iron. You're taking a whole bunch of weight out. Movement. Less weight means easier movement. And then the 4th and final phase is we actually take the carrier, cut all the pickup points off, and weld new brackets on in new locations. So we get the geometry is pretty much as good as it can get within the OE architecture. Now it's hard to get a whole lot of anti-squat into an IRS, but we got in there as much as we could. The other thing that we really focused on was stabilizing the roll center in like a double wishbone type situation, going through curves and around corners and stuff. The roll center has a bad habit of migrating all over the place. But we pretty much got it stabilized, just a few inches off the ground, in kind of a pretty tight circle. So that's kind of like the 4th phase, and all of this together, I mean, it just makes these cars, this IRS, just drive like an absolute dream. I mean, currently my track car, my green track car that a lot of people have seen over the years, I could drive that all day and not get tired. I could put anywhere on the track I wanted. I used to take, do rides, charity rides, and I just drive the thing all day and would never get tired. I mean, it just handled like a breeze because it's all about geometry. I mean, I spent a lot of time working on suspension geometry, and I learned that from some of the guys I work with in professional racing. Okay, so that moves us into the 550 cars, which are a huge, huge step forward in Mustang. The chassis is so much more rigid. We didn't need to do subframe connectors and matrix brace. I mean, the chassis is super rigid because they went to an IRS in the back and the double length, lower length McPherson strut. What we do have bolt-on jacking rails to make it easier to jack up. But we really didn't have to do much in the way of chassis stiffening because it's already there. But they went to this new suspension in 2015. It's got the double lower and the IRS in the back. And with this double lower, what's kind of interesting is actually, again, if you draw these lines, it's all about geometry. Actually, this is the virtual ball joint is actually out here. Even though there's 2 ball joints, the virtual ball joint is out here. And as it goes through turning sequence, it actually moves around. And there's some interesting geometry that goes with that, but we're not going to get into that tonight. And then here's the rear IRS. This is such a nice compact package compared to SN95. I mean, we get people all the time calling and want to know if they can put the 550 IRS in like a Fox and SN95. And Canyon, probably a major engineering project, because you have to cut pretty much the whole back of the car out to package this. And then once you get it in there, you don't have all the nannies that come with the 550 cars. You know, the stability control and all that to help keep the back squared around. Most of the accidents we've seen with 550 cars are guys that get really brave and turn all the nanny devices off. And certainly you want to turn off traction control. I think there's maybe 3 levels, or I can't remember what, but you turn them all off. And the guys that turn all of them off and aren't really super skilled, or don't have high skill level, back the things in the wall, because the back of the car just gets loose. So, you know, putting this into an earlier car, you know, good luck. I mean, it's huge. You got to re-engineer the whole car. If you want something for the earlier cars, you know, get the SN95, the IRS, if you can find them. I mean, it's a simple bolt-in. And then you can see all the different pieces. It's the geometry is kind of odd. I'm not a big fan of the geometry. At some point, I want to do a new IRS for the back, but it is so far down the list right now. We got so many things, projects. Oh, Carrie, you want us to jump in here?
Oh, sure. Okay. Do you want to, should we give away the gift certificate since you're running so late, and then we will answer questions? Do you want to take that down, Ken? And then it's the 10th person from the bottom of the Zoom list. So let's look at questions here.
I was going so fast. Is that the end of the presentation for tonight?
Yeah, it is.
Huh, well.
So I think we should let everybody know that probably Kenny is going to be speaking for about an hour and a half every night. I see a lot of people kind of coming in and out right now, and I think it's because it's getting late. So just try to give yourself about an hour and a half. Sometimes he goes 2 hours.
We'll get a little earlier start because we won't be dealing with the technical stuff.
Yeah, and so anyway, the program just keeps getting better and better. So let's see. We're going to count Thorson to everybody. I don't know what he's saying there. We'll count him. Go up 10 from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Thorson Klaus wins a $100 gift card. He came in at 7:54 and asked, do the KB lower control arms for SN95 change the angle of the sway bar? So
you just kind of died.
Are you ready to take questions? Congratulations, Thorson.
Can you repeat
on the $100 gift
question?
card, what you can do is, sure, just a minute. Thorson, why don't you email me at csouthworth@kennybrown.com, or just call in the office. Any way you can get in touch with us, we will get you that gift card. Let's see, here's the questions. This is from Thorson. Do the Kenny Brown lower control arms for this SN95 change the angle of the sway bar?
No. I mean, we've got the sway bar adjustable end length. We also have a sway bar that we designed, engineered specifically for our K member. Back then, we did a lot of development testing back in 2001, and we had like 3 different thicknesses on sway bars, and we always came back to 1. So now we only have 1 sway bar, and it's adjustable. But it doesn't change. It doesn't change. I mean, the only reason it would change the angle is if you lower the car, then you know the control arm moves up and down. But as far as in itself, no, we try to put the pickup for the sway bar exactly where it was, or close to where it was on the factory. Okay? Carrie, why don't you just read the questions? It might go a little faster. Except you muted yourself.
Just say, yeah, I'm sorry about that. If somebody does want to get in and ask you another question once I ask them, they go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them. But this is a question from Jeff Douglas. So Jeff, if you want to talk to Kenny directly, you can. His questions: I have a 19 Shelby GT350 with track pack. What shocks and springs do I need to go with? Okay, that's kind of like a really good question, because more than likely you've got the MagnaRide suspension. MagnaRide suspension is really good. They can use a soft spring and make it handle better, because the MagnaRide inside the shocks, it's all metal,
and they just tighten it up. So it's like adding more spring rate and more resistance in the shocks. Unfortunately, they really won't take a lot of spring. I think from the factory, I think you got maybe around 200. I think I will be maybe doing that tomorrow night. You got maybe 200 spring rate, and about the best you can do is the front springs off of a 350R. Now, if you want to ditch the Magna Ride, we've got some really good choices. We've got a number of good choices. Our kind of like our premium package for our track guys for the 550 cars is the JRZ Pro, double adjustable monotube remote canister. I have two major shock companies we use. One is JRZ. They're custom built for me in the Netherlands and then shipped over. I discovered JRZ back in 2011, and that's the shock that my son used to win the championship. And they came, 2 years later, they came out with an RS line, which is more for the club people, because they're a race shock company, and some of the race shocks are ridiculously stupid expensive, like $10,000 a piece. So they came out with RS line, and we use that a lot. RS single adjustable, put them under most cars, just simply because you only have one thing to adjust. And for people that haven't adjusted shocks before, it's easier to learn one thing than two. We've got a street performance package that is about a 395 front spring that's non-adjustable, it's pre-adjusted. And those are kind of like, we've got the JRZs and we've got a street performance. Now for 197s, we've got a bunch of other shock choices. But for the 550 cars, I mean, that's kind of like it. This is a thing. I mean, if you want to get deeper into this, you can sign up for one of the 15-minute consults. I like to do quite a few of those. We can talk more directly, and I can give you better direction if I know more of what you're doing, what you want to do with the car.
Yeah, you ready for the next one, Kenny?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
With the 2011, 2014 spindles bolt on right onto my 197 without having to change anything else?
Couldn't quite understand that. Say it again.
Would the 2011 to 2014 Mustang spindles, would they bolt right onto my 08 197?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everything is the same except the ball joint. So yeah, it's just a straight swap, and we do that all the time. In fact, we just did last week. We did an 08 Roush Mustang. We upgraded my latest AGS 4.5 suspension, and we did the upgraded spindles. So yep, no problem. The bolt right on.
Thank you very much, Kenny.
Boy, Jennifer, you got awful deep voice.
Yeah, it's my wife's page. She signs me up for it, so it's her name.
So what's your real name besides Jennifer?
Charlie.
Charlie. Okay, Charlie. We will take a note of that. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Great. Hope you're enjoying it.
I really enjoy what you and Kenny are doing, and I got some of his jack rails and stuff on my 1990 25th anniversary Fox I gave to my son.
That's cool. That is awesome. So I'm going to interrupt you, Kenny, for questions for a minute because it is getting late. I want to just share with you what Kenny's going to be talking about tomorrow. He's just started getting into the really interesting stuff. So today he went through the performance platform chassis suspension. He still has wheels, tires, and brakes, cooling, safety, aero, and engine. So he's going to be going through the rest of those tomorrow, and he's going to be giving you a lot of tips, especially on the brake side. I really love his brake presentation. So join us tomorrow for that. And then day 3, he will be going deeper. He wants to give you the foundation first. And then on day 3, we'll be dialing in your car for maximum performance. And day 4 is refining your driving techniques and track prep tips. Tomorrow he will, Kenny, you're going to be giving another gift certificate away tomorrow. So let's get on to some questions. If you want to watch the replay, we will have it listed in the Speed Therapy Society. And here we go, Kenny. Let's ask another question here. This is from Diane. Hey, Kenny, great stuff so far, but I'm curious, how do you account for different tire stiffness, even if you're running a square setup, when choosing a spring and sway bar package?
What was the first part again? Account for
The Hey Kenny? Okay, I'm curious, how do you account for different tire stiffness, even if running a square setup when choosing a spring and sway bar package? And Dan, if you're out there, if you want to communicate with Kenny, go ahead.
I'm not sure what we mean by tire stiffness. I mean, all the sidewalls are pretty stiff. As
Dan,
far
if you're
as,
out there, unmute yourself and talk to
Yeah.
Kenny.
Yep. Here I am.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, obviously the tire has some kind of spring rate, and that spring rate, depending on what kind of wheels you're running, what width you're running, even what brand of tires you're running, it changes. So I'm just curious if you take that into account when you're thinking about sway bar sizes and shocks and springs and everything like that.
springs, yes. Sway bars, no. The thing about springs, we're going to talk about spring rates coming up, is the stickier the tire, not so much the the elasticity or the spring rate in it, but the stickier the tire, the more spring you need, and we'll be getting into that tomorrow. But what I account for it, like just real quickly, like most of the street cars come out of the factory with like 134 to 150 front spring rate. Our street performance, our sport touring is 350 on the front. Street performance is 400. Our intermediate track on stock street tires is in the 500, 550 range, depending on skill level. And then for our advanced guys on track tires, it is 650. And if you think that's a lot, my late son Paul, on his World Challenge car with Pirelli slicks, we were running 850 to 950. So when you get the slicks, you need a lot more spring rate, and that's a big mistake a lot of people make. We'll probably get on that a little later, but they put slicks onto a stock Mustang thinking, well, it's going to really make me fast, and it actually it's work. I mean, it makes seem like you're fast, but the car is not designed for. It doesn't have the spring rate, doesn't have the geometry, doesn't have the engineering to support slicks. So it's kind of like overall bad decision. I've seen bad things happen when people do that. Okay, next.
Yeah, I was mostly just curious. I've talked to some of your competitors about kind of setup things like that, and they don't even take into account what kind of tires you're running at all. So,
well, I think what you'll find is we do things a lot differently here, and I don't think there's anybody else out there that has the level of background knowledge and experience that I do. And I've been doing suspensions on race cars since the 70s, so. And what I'm talking about today is the culmination, all that. I know there are a lot of people out there that most other places sell parts. We sort of sell systems. Certainly there's parts involved, but for this 197, rear grip gets a system, front grip gets a system.
Yeah.
So actually the type of tires, whether it's a street tire, I'm not going to say all season, a street tire, track tire, or race tire. That actually comes into consideration when I'm picking brake pads for people too. So, there's more to it than just spring rate. But I'm big on spring rate.
Yeah, and I am also big on the race car vehicle dynamics book. So we're one from the same page.
Okay, cool.
Is that Dan Gramza? Is that who's speaking?
No, this is Dan Doroff.
Okay, Dan. Sorry about that. Well, good. So join us tomorrow. Make sure you do. Tomorrow you're going to really learn about what you're asking about. Okay, here's the next question, Darren. Kenny, we'll try to get through these quickly because I know people here. Darren Ingelston, great information and lots of stuff to take in. What can be done to correct the rear suspension geometry in a Fox body?
It's hard. When we were doing Foxes, we had our Track Kit Plus, which had axle brackets, which lowered the pickup point on the rear axle, increased anti-squat, and then we used the panner bar to bring the roll center all the way down. Same roll center that we used for the 197 cars. But aside from that, we haven't brought that system back into production yet for a couple of reasons. One, it turned out to be one of those real pain in the butt things. First of all, that when you're using a panner bar to defeat the factory roll center, introduce a new theoretical lower roll center, it's critically important. And when that car is at ride height, that the panner bar has absolutely zero preload. In other words, you can slide a bolt out and slide one back in. A lot of people didn't read the instructions, and they would preload the bar, And if you preload the bar, then it wants to go this way. The axle's trying to go the other way. And, you know, we've had, you know, it starts breaking things. The other thing we ran into is back then there was like a gazillion different exhaust systems for Fox. And there's very little real estate back there, you know, to put the whole system in. And even though we had 4 or 5 different ones for different exhaust systems, and inadvertently, I mean, we would design them around a specific exhaust. We had somebody call with that exhaust, hey, the thing hits my exhaust system. Well, you know, they wouldn't stop to think that maybe they didn't install the exhaust right, or they maybe installed the exhaust but didn't realize that, hey, when it gets hot, it expands. So, I mean, it was kind of a real pain, and we've got so much going on. We got so many new products in the works that I just haven't had time to, and I'm not planning on bringing that system back. I do probably next year sometime, maybe. I hope I can get to doing a bolt-in 4-link. They'll feature the same geometry we're using in the 197s, but that's, you know, that's probably at least a year off. When I do it, I just want to do it right, like what we did before was kind of like a Band-Aid. So, you know, unfortunately, I don't have much. That's where I might say that, you know, what you get to use is our axle brackets, and then I think there's a, I have to check and see, somebody out there still has a panner bar that will lower it down. I'd get the lower panner, somebody else's lower panner bar, and then use our axle brackets, and that's going to probably be as good as you can get, and absolutely positively stay away from urethane bushings on control arms. Urethane bushings are for things that move straight up and down. For things that twist, they don't work because they don't twist. I mean, it's good for in the back. I mean, it's good for control arms in the front, for things that go up and down. But if it has to twist like a rear lower control arm on a Mustang, it'll get to a certain point and it won't twist anymore, and it binds. And when it binds, you lose your rear suspension. And when that happens, it gets loose and you lose the back. So you always want to have something on the back that articulates. That's why we use rod ends. They're super high quality, plus they're Teflon lined for smooth and smooth, long-lasting, and quiet operation. So yeah, that's kind of like the best I can suggest at this point. I wish I had more, but I just don't right now. Or put in an IRS. A lot of guys put an IRS in the Fox cars if you can find one. Okay.
So we have a number of questions left, but I just wanted to make note of the people that are still hanging on, we're probably waiting for the questions to be answered. This is really kind of like the, I don't know, I guess what Kenny really shares a lot. This is the stick around for. He does a lot of great presenting, but answering some of these questions you can learn a lot from. So if you have any friends that might want to join in on this, let us know. I'll have Brad put a link up there so you can invite them. They can just watch this first night on replay. We'll cut off the very beginning where we had the Facebook issue. Anyway, here's the next question. Anthony Eversley. I have a 15 Performance Pack Mustang GT. I understand this particular model comes with an upsized rear sway bar. I want to upgrade both front and back sway bars. What do you suggest would be the size anti-sway bar to look for?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but we're going to talk about that tomorrow night.
So
I've got a chart that has all the sway bar and spring rates, and we can kind of talk about that tomorrow night. So come back tomorrow night.
Okay, so I'll make a note of that. So you answer that again. Here's another one. Thorson Kloss, he's the winner of the $100 gift card. Solid mount motor mounts can crack could the solid bushings potentially crack the rear axle and diff case?
You need to start over because you cut out halfway through.
Okay, sure. Solid motor mounts can crack non-race engine blocks. Can the solid bushings potentially crack the rear axle and diff case?
I'm not sure. Is this an IRS car or a live axle car?
Yeah, it's an IRS car.
Oh, IRS car? No. It's completely different. I mean, we use the solid bushings in the front specifically to keep the nose of the pinion from jumping up and down, and we use a really strong brace, and then the aluminum bushings. You can change the stack on them. The way I engineered it, you can change the stack so you can actually put the nose of the diff up a little bit. We had back in I think '99 or 2001. There was a bunch of vibration issues with the IRS cars, and we've had customers, Ford dealers couldn't fix it. And all we did was we put that, you know, the stiff bushing, the aluminum bushings in, increased the pinion angle, and vibration went away. So no, I mean, it doesn't make any difference. We leave the factory bushing in the back just so that there's something that absorbs some of the vibration, but lock the.
Ah, I see. Got it.
Okay.
And this is the next question from Thorsten too. And Thorsten, just you know, chime in if you like. Do you like a higher roll center to increase mechanical grip, or is a stock roll center already too high?
In which?
This is Thorsten, so I'm assuming he just spoke to you.
So, you know, if you have a higher roll center, you can get more weight onto the rear of the tire in the rear. The question is that already too high, or is the rake too much?
The roll center I like low roll centers. And just simply because, I mean, I like controlling a roll through the middle of a corner. And if the roll center is high, the back of the car is going to roll at a higher point and then low. So, I mean, I keep the roll centers down really low. I mean, on the IRS cars with the geometry change, it's, you know, we get the roll center to live in an envelope about this big, so that's all the further it moves. And it's just about a couple inches off the ground. And that seems to work really, really well. We, you know, did that back in 2001, and we run with it ever since, and it seems to work really well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Okay, we have another question here from Dylan. I know a lot of solid axle guys, especially drag cars, upgrade their upper and lower torque box to make a more solid chassis. Any merit to upgrading them for IRS cars during track days? SN95 is what I'm mostly concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, the upper torque box you don't use with a with the IRS. It's just the lower and then the back. And something else I should have pointed out, when we do the geometry upgrade to the IRS carrier, there's a great big huge mount in the back that mounts the carrier to the frame rail. It's big, it's clunky, it weighs a bunch, and it gets in the way. Actually, we whack that off and we put a bracket on there that bolts directly to the frame rail. So that, you know, once you do that, you don't have to change front bushings or anything. I mean, the carrier is just locked into the frame because it bolts solid to the rear frame rail. We actually have modified that bracket just recently with a couple extra holes, so it will bolt onto most of the Fox cars. You know, Fox cars are really strange from, you know, from 79 up until like 86, but we made some extra holes in there, so it's still bolt onto a Fox car.
Okay, here's a good question from Carl Ewing. What would you recommend for a 99 to 04 that would be a good all-around kit or setup, maybe for a drag, track day, autocross day car?
It's the same thing, performance foundation, you know, chassis first, you know, get that matrix under there, suspension, get a good set of springs and shocks, you know, pick your spring rates and your shocks accordingly to how you're going to use the car. And then brakes, you know, focus on the brakes. We'll talk about brakes and you know, tomorrow or the next day. It's all about that performance foundation. I mean, you get the basics down and it just blow you away how much nicer the car is. So, you know, on a Fox or SN95, always start with the matrix system. You got to get the chassis done first and then start looking at springs and shocks. K-member or the IRS, we can do a lot of things with IRS. And then brakes, upgrading the brakes, and we'll talk about more brakes coming up. Okay.
Next question. This is from Jim Ramirez. Guys, if I mention your name and ask your question, you can jump in and talk to Kenny. Jim Ramirez, question, why are there very few adjustable rear sway bars for Cobras, i.e. the Terminator IRS?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can tell you that with the suspension that we do for the IRS Cobras, we don't change the rear sway bar. All we do is we put urethane bushings in to make it react a little better. And I mean, it seems to work fine. You don't want to get too much extra roll resistance in the back, like bigger sway bars on some cars, because it just makes the back of the car get loose. So I've never found the need on the IRS cars to change the rear bar, just the front bar. Actually, the same thing on the 550 cars. We never changed the rear bar on 550s. What we found in development way back when on the 550 platform is we started off with like a 3-way adjustable rear sway bar, and all I ever did, I kept adjusting it to full soft. We kept going full soft all the time. And I just thought, why are we even putting the sway bar on if we're just going to full soft? So we leave the factory back on the rear and then change the front. Okay.
Okay, Frank Barker, you may need to help us out on this one. Based on what you've told us about chassis and suspension, was my coilover setup on my 17 S550 a good idea, or should I have stayed with the traditional setup? So Frank, if you're out there, you might want to elaborate a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Actually, I think it's a great idea. I mean,
Frank, are you there? Frank?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I originally bought the my S550 as a performance pack, the previous owner had iBike Sportline lowering springs on. Now I live here in New York, so our road's a bit rough, so it gave a bit of a rough ride. But what it eventually ended up doing, it ended up blowing out the shock on the right side, on the passenger side of the car. So I was going back and forth as to what was the best setup that would give me a bit of more of a comfortable ride here in New York, but at the same time still give me a good performance feel, something that I can possibly adjust. I was really enamored by the thought that there's adjustability in terms of ride height and comfort. But based upon listening to what Kenny was saying, all about suspension and so forth, I'm just wondering, was going that route the best idea?
That's a great question. It's like, just because the shock's a coilover doesn't necessarily mean it's a good coilover. Were those adjustable or the non-adjustables? Do you remember?
Yeah, they're adjustable. They're the BC Racing coilovers.
Okay, they were probably adjusted incorrectly.
Okay.
I mean, it's more than likely there was way too much adjustment in them. I'm guessing they're single adjustables. Way too much rebound adjustment. We'll talk about springs and shocks tomorrow. And the whole idea of the rebound on a shock is to control as the spring compresses, is to control how fast or slow it uncompresses itself. And a lot of people think because you got an adjustable shock, you turn it up, the full hard and adjust it all the way up. And that's the worst thing to do. And when I do my shock adjustments, I start from full soft and work my way up. Because in the end, I want the shock adjustment as soft as possible for control and compliance. Okay? Because you don't want the tires to skip across the road, you want them to move with the road. So that's why I always start from soft and go up. A lot of people think, adjust it, I'm going to do it like a race car and crank them all the way up. I actually learned that the hard way back in about 72, 73 on my Formula B. I was racing a Formula B, and I thought, man, I'm going to get these adjustable shocks from J.C. Whitney, which was a big place back then. And I put them on my car, and I just couldn't drive it. I kept turning them down and down and down, and I just couldn't drive it. I put the stock shocks back on, drove like a dream. So, I mean, it's like you want the shocks as soft as possible for control. And we're going to be bringing online another shock that's pre-adjusted. It's got a spring rate in the front of about 395, which is quite a bit more than the stock one would have. And historically, this brand has had pretty decent valving. It's a German monotube. We think that's going to be a good option. I mean, our JRZs are really good, but they're not expensive as the race shocks, but I think they're like anywhere from $4,500 to $5,200 or something like that. So,
Kenny, I think I'm gonna take your advice.
Online, and yeah, if you'd like to try them, let me know.
I'm gonna take your advice and start with them soft, the adjustment soft, and then work from there. Because I did the opposite, and I started from hard and working my way back.
Okay, if you're going to do that, here's what you do. Find yourself a road that's got a pretty good dip in it, and start at full soft and hit that dip at a pretty good speed. If the car takes more than one bounce after it, add rebound one click at a time. And just keep adding one click at a time until it goes through the bump, takes one set, and goes on. And that's when you want to adjust them.
Thank you so much, Kenny.
So try that and see what you get.
All right, will do.
Frank, as you go through there, if you need some more direction from Kenny, he does. We do 15-minute free consults. So Brad will link something in the chat here, so you can sign up for a 15-minute consult if you want.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, we have another question from Scott Mattis. I'm running an SLA front end on my 87 Mustang. Is a strut tower brace still beneficial since I'm not running struts?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the design. Have not been a fan for a lot of the SLAs that have come out for Fox and SN95. I don't know which kind you have, but I mean, just because it's an SLA doesn't necessarily mean it has good geometry. In fact, my late son, Paul, helped me do the development on the 197 on our strut suspension. And he said the geometry we put in that drove and worked every bit as good as most of the SLAs he's driven. But getting back to your question, if you take, I mean, there's a big amount of chassis in that strut tower. If you take it out, be sure you do some additional reinforcement to replace. Like I would come down from the firewall to the frame rail, triangulate. You just add some rigidity because you're taking a lot of the body away. I mean, you can take it away if you need more room, but you need to reinforce those front frame rails, or they're just going to start doing this. So, next.
Okay, I just want to mention this. Francis Curtis, will the PowerPoints he showed be available? I lost part of the feed during the presentation. Francis, we will not have the PowerPoints, but you can rewatch the, this is going to be a replay. So that will be available through email on the Facebook Speed Therapy Society Facebook group page. And you can also get it from one of your Kenny Brown team ambassadors. So yes, it will, the video will be available, the PowerPoint will not. Here's another question, Smokin' Cat Garage, that's pretty cool. I have a 2006 Roush RS3 that has the upgraded three-way shocks. What do you think of its suspension?
I really don't have a good answer. I don't have first-hand experience with the three-way shocks. I avoid three-way and four-way shocks for our customers for the simple reason that if there's things to adjust, most people will adjust them, and a lot more times than not they'll adjust themselves into the fence. That's why I like single adjustables for people just getting into it, and then double adjustables for more advanced. But as far as the three-ways, I just don't have. I have no first-hand experience. So I really can't comment on that. What I can comment on is we had the 08 Roush that was in here last week. We upgraded to 4.5 suspension. We also had to upgrade the front springs. We changed the rear springs to strange coilovers because we needed to go way up on our spring rate, and the shocks that came with it wouldn't take it. Roush wouldn't tell them the spring rates, so we had to guess at it, and we're thinking those shocks were single adjustable were KWs. Is it KW? Yeah. But anyway, that's the only experience I have with those shocks. So I'm sorry I can't give you any more information. I just don't know.
Okay, this is our last question, Kenny. And before I ask it, everybody, we're very thankful that you came tonight. Tomorrow night, like I said, it just gets better and better. So we hope you see you tomorrow night. If you can't make tomorrow night, remember there is a replay. And if you have any questions that you need help with, reach out to one of the Kenny Brown team ambassadors. They are here to help you to make this a very good experience. Okay, Kenny, these are two engine questions, and I'm not sure who they're from. Can I use a rubber gasket on a tin oil pan? My engine builder says on the valve covers, I should only use rubber if I have aluminum valve covers.
No, I'm not sure what engine, but I mean it's really hard to beat the factory stuff when it comes to gaskets. I know it just kind of depends on the engine. I guess getting back to my overhead valve days, the Windsor days, there was some that were cork. Anytime you get like a valve cover gasket, you want to have ones that have like a little spacer in there so that you can't over tighten them. Because that's something a lot of people do is over tighten the gasket and squish it out. I would say that anything that's a good quality and has a little spacer in there so you can only tighten it so much would be fine. But the best resource is going to be your engine builder, quite frankly. Because he's going to know what you've got and what's going on.
And this is, I believe, from the same person. I have roller rockers. They keep knocking at 500 miles. I try to adjust them, but they always have a bit of slack left to right. Should I replace them?
Yeah, probably. I'm guessing this is a Windsor,
No, it's a small block Chevy.
small block Chevy.
Yeah.
That's what back in the 70s. Yeah, I mean, if they're moving back and forth, I mean, they really shouldn't. I mean, it should be pretty stable. Again, you might check with somebody that builds a lot of Chevy motors. I think I built my last Chevy motor in about 71, maybe. So it's been a while.
It's a 74. It's on a Corvette, but it's the trick flow rockers. And like they're almost new when I replaced the valves and the push rods, the lifters and the push rods. The only thing left is the rockers. And it's making
I mean, they shouldn't be moving. They should just go like that. And that's it.
But left to right, you can hear you got click, click, so I should replace them.
Yeah, take a closer look at that, or or get with somebody who does a lot of GM motors.
Yeah,
and
all
see
right.
what they think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Carrie.
Kenny, that is it for questions.
Okay. Well, is on the PowerPoint, does it say what tomorrow night is?
I'll go over it again. It probably does say what tomorrow is. There we go.
Wheels, tires, brakes. We're going to probably get into shocks and springs too tomorrow night, I think. So
It's a lot of information.
that's a big thing in performance. I mean, shocks and springs are super important and make your cars handle, and because they each do a specific job. And again, you needed shocks and springs need to be together. I mean, they need to work together. That's because you can't overwhelm the shocks with a heavy-duty spring. It's bad. Thinking all the way back like our Fox days, people would put like upgraded springs on the Fox cars without changing shocks. And, they said the ride quality was bad and handled good. What happened is it was just, the shocks are engineered and designed around a specific spring rate that comes on the car. You go, double that spring rate and the shock's completely overwhelmed. So it's really important that shocks and springs work together as a team.
Okay, you're sharing tomorrow night's information, Kenny.
Well, I better shut up then.
So anyway, go ahead, Kenny. You want to say goodbye?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's up to me?
Or do you want me
Okay.
to say it?
Well, now, I'll say, really appreciate you guys showing up. Again, I hope you're learning. I'm going through this pretty fast because there's so much to cover in such few time. A little later on, we'll talk about my academy, which is a whole different program that's where you talk about information. Anyway, I appreciate you showing up. I hope you learned something. Hope you learn more tomorrow night, and I hope it's things that you can use, because that's the most important thing. Is, like I say, the worst information gets from the internet or from the paddock, or the guy down the street that thinks he knows everything. So with that, tomorrow night is going to be here before you know it. Have a good rest of your evening, and I will see you all tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And hopefully without any of our changes that are issues with Facebook that we had this evening. So thanks for coming. Like I say, I hope you enjoyed yourself. Carrie, do you have any parting words?
Just remember to leave an hour and a half for tomorrow night's session. Sometimes he goes 2 hours like he did tonight. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to cut it off at a specific time. If you guys got questions, I'm going to answer them. So, okay, I'm still rattling on. Again, I get wound up the way I go. So, okay, listen, so everybody showed up. We will see you tomorrow night. Have a good rest of your evening.
All right, thanks. See you tomorrow.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.